I never thought pouring coffee in a mess hall could feel like a battlefield. But when you're the lowest ranked nurse on base, and a woman at that, sometimes the real war isn't overseas. It's right here, in the sideways glances, the half laughs, the little digs that cut deeper than shrapnel. That morning at Fort Hamilton, the air was thick with fried bacon, boot polish, and the sound of voices carrying louder than they needed to. I was just moving between tables with a tray when I heard it. A sergeant muttering loud enough for his buddies to catch it. "That's Carter. She's just here because no one else would take her. Deadweight in a uniform." The table erupted in quiet chuckles. I didn't flinch, didn't even blink. I'd learned a long time ago that if you reacted, they won. So I just kept my eyes down, served the plates, and walked away like their words didn't burn. Thing is, I wasn't even supposed to be there. I'd wanted to be in the medical corps frontline units. But with budget cuts and politics, I was shoved into what they called soft duty. To them, I was just another pair of hands. Not a soldier worth respect. But back home, I had a younger brother who couldn't breathe without machines. Every dollar I made here kept him alive. So I swallowed their pride for him, every damn day. That night, though, everything changed. The base's officers' lounge wasn't a place I belonged, but I'd been ordered to cover for a buddy who was sick. The room was dim, full of cigar smoke, and the quiet hum of old rock classics playing from a jukebox no one touched. That's when I saw him. General Robert Hale. To anyone outside, the man was a legend. Decorated, respected, the kind of name that made cadets stand straighter. But up close, under the low light, he looked like a ghost stuffed into a pressed uniform. His glass of bourbon wasn't his first, or his fifth. I watched his hand tremble slightly as he motioned for another pour. The bartender glanced at me. "New girl, huh? If Hale wants a drink, you bring it. Don't ask questions. Just keep 'em coming. His tips are good." I could have done it. Just another glass, slide it across, walk away invisible. But I couldn't stop staring at him. His medals might have shined, but his eyes were hollow, the same emptiness I'd seen in the mirror after a night listening to my brother cough until dawn. I don't know what snapped in me. Maybe it was the way he clutched the glass, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Maybe it was the thought of a man who'd once commanded thousands, now quietly drinking himself to death, while everyone else pretended not to see. So when he gestured again, I set the bottle down, unopened. My voice was steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "Sir, with all respect, I can't pour you another." The whole room froze. Officers stopped mid-sentence. Forks hovered in the air. You don't say no to a general, not here, not ever. Hale's head turned slowly, his bleary eyes narrowing on me. For a second, I thought he might laugh. Instead, he rasped, "Do you have any idea who I am?" I swallowed hard but didn't look away. "Yes, sir, and that's exactly why I'm saying it. You don't need another drink. You need water, and probably a ride back to your quarters." You could have cut the silence with a knife. One of the captains at the bar muttered under his breath, "She's done. Career suicide." Hale's jaw clenched. His knuckles whitened on the glass. I braced myself for the explosion, for him to tear me apart in front of everyone. Instead, something shifted. The fury in his eyes cracked, just for a moment, and underneath it I saw something raw, something I wasn't supposed to see in a man like him. Grief. He didn't yell, didn't throw me out. He just set his glass down, pushed it away, and whispered, "Call my driver." Then he stood, taller than I'd expected, straightened his jacket, and walked out of the lounge without looking back. The moment the door closed, the room erupted. My supervisor stormed over, face pale with panic. "Carter, what the hell were you thinking? That was General Hale. You don't psychoanalyze a man like him. You serve, still or sparkling. That's it." I didn't argue. I knew what was coming. Sure enough, before my shift ended, I was told to pack my things. Dismissed. Just like that. Walking back across the base that night, the cold cut straight through me. I'd just lost the one job keeping my brother's lungs full of air. But under all the fear and the shame, there was this strange calm. Because for once, I hadn't been invisible. For once, I'd said what no one else dared to. And I had no idea that single act, the one that cost me everything, was about to change my life in ways I couldn't begin to imagine. I thought losing my post at Fort Hamilton would crush me, but truth is, I'd been walking on eggshells there for months. The next morning, I woke up in my tiny off-base apartment, stared at the pile of uniforms in the corner, and it hit me. I didn't even know if I'd ever put one on again. The phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Mom. She didn't even bother with good mornings anymore. She just said, "He barely slept last night, Em. The nebulizer's on its last leg. Doctor says we need the new model." Her voice cracked like she was trying to hold the whole world together with duct tape. I promised her I'd figure it out, even though the truth was sitting like a stone in my gut. I had no paycheck now, no insurance, no leverage. I spent the next week running on fumes. I picked up odd shifts at a diner off the highway, the kind of place where truckers order black coffee at 2 a.m. and leave you crumpled dollar bills that smell like engine oil. Every night I came home smelling of bacon grease, sitting at the table with bills spread out like enemy maps. Rent, medical equipment, past due notices. It felt like I was in a war of attrition, just me and a stack of envelopes that didn't stop coming. The worst part, the silence from the base. Nobody called. Not one person checked in. Not even to ask if I'd landed on my feet. You spend years wearing the same boots, standing the same roll calls, thinking you're part of a family. Then you realize some families are only as loyal as your last order. That kind of cold shoulder stings more than any insult ever did. One night I ran into Sergeant Kelly, a guy I used to patch up in the infirmary whenever he busted his knuckles on the punching bag. He spotted me at the diner, apron tied around my waist, refilling sugar jars. His eyes softened for a second before he caught himself. "Heard what happened with Hale," he muttered when I brought his burger. "Took guts, Carter. Most of us would have just kept pouring." Then just as quick, he looked away like saying it out loud was dangerous. That tiny scrap of acknowledgement hit me harder than a medal. It reminded me that not everyone on base thought I was dead weight. Some of them had seen me. Maybe they just didn't have the guts to stand beside me. Still, that didn't pay the bills. By the time Friday rolled around, I was running on black coffee and prayer. I remember collapsing onto the couch, thinking maybe this was it. Maybe I'd have to pack up, move back home, watch my brother fade, and admit the Army had wrung me out and tossed me aside. Then the doorbell rang. Nobody rings my doorbell. Not where I live. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I walked to the door. Outside, parked, under the weak streetlight, was a black SUV with tinted windows, the kind you only see in recruitment commercials or when brass visits town. A man in a pressed suit stood on the stoop, hands folded, face carved out of stone. He looked like he hadn't cracked a smile since basic training. "Miss Carter?" he asked. His voice was calm, polite, almost too polite. He held out an envelope, thick, cream-colored, with my name written across the front in handwriting that looked like it belonged in a history book. "This is for you." I swear my hands shook when I took it. The guy gave me a curt nod, turned, and slid back into the SUV. A moment later, the vehicle pulled away, leaving nothing but exhaust and questions swirling in the night air. I closed the door, sat down at the kitchen table, and just stared at that envelope. It didn't have a return address, no government seal, nothing. Just my name, Emily Carter, written like it meant something. I ran my thumb over the wax seal before finally breaking it open. Inside was a letter, not typed, not official, handwritten, bold, deliberate. "Your refusal to serve me that night was unexpected and necessary. You may not realize the weight of what you did, but I do. I ask for your company, not as a subordinate, but as a reminder of truth. 1 week, my residence, all accommodations arranged, compensation, $100,000. At the bottom was a signature I recognized instantly. Robert Hale. I sat there, stunned. My first thought was, this has to be a setup, some twisted prank. But tucked behind the letter was a cashier's check, $10,000. My name printed clean across it. In the memo line, "For your immediate inconvenience." My throat went dry. $100,000. That wasn't just money. That was every hospital bill cleared, That was my brother breathing without fear. That was freedom from the weight that had been pressing on my chest since I was old enough to pay rent. But my second thought hit just as fast. Why me? Why would a general, a man with more medals than I had friends, want me at his side? And for a week? I didn't have to wait long for doubt to crash in. Mom thought it was insane. You don't know this man, Em. He's powerful, grieving, unpredictable. You don't just step into a man's private world like that. She was terrified I'd be walking into a cage with no lock on my side. She wasn't wrong. But then I thought about that night in the lounge, the way his eyes had cracked open just a sliver when I told him no. I thought about the way he left without another drink, like he'd been waiting for someone, anyone, to draw a line in the sand for him. And I thought about Liam, my brother, wheezing in his sleep down the hall, a boy who hadn't had a single day in his life where breathing came easy. I couldn't shake the feeling that the universe was handing me something impossible, a chance to change everything, or lose everything. That night I sat by the window with the letter in one hand and the check in the other, staring at the empty street outside. I didn't sleep a wink. My head spun with every warning, every fear, every hope. By dawn, one thought cut through the noise. Sometimes you don't get to pick safe roads. Sometimes you've got to take the one that scares you most. I didn't know what I was expecting when I stepped off that military transport plane. Maybe some kind of cold fortress with cameras on every corner, soldiers standing stiff at the gates. Instead, it felt like I'd landed in another world. The compound was hidden on a strip of government-owned land off the Carolina coast, the kind of place that doesn't show up on maps. The sea air was thick, the pine trees swayed like sentries, and beyond the wire fences stood a cluster of quiet, whitewashed buildings with green roofs that looked almost too normal. That's what made it eerie. General Robert Hale was waiting when I arrived. He wasn't in dress uniform, no medals, no stiff salute, just khakis, a simple polo shirt, and bare hands gripping a coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping him steady. He looked at me with those sharp, weathered eyes, and for a second I saw the man the country still believed he was. Steady, unshakable, a warrior. But it didn't last long. His shoulders slumped, and he said softly, "Carter, thank you for coming. I know how strange this must feel." Strange didn't even cover it. I'd been flown in like some VIP, escorted by a driver who barely spoke a word, and led into a world I didn't belong to. I kept asking myself, why me? Why out of everyone did he pick me? The first 2 days were almost disarming. Hale walked with me along the perimeter trails, told me stories about his deployments, the kind of things that never make it into history books. He asked about my family, about Liam, and he listened without interrupting, without pity. It almost felt normal. Too normal. But on the third night, the cracks showed. We were having dinner in his quarters, a quiet room with walls lined with books and pictures of his younger days in uniform. For the first time since I'd met him, he actually smiled when he talked about his daughter, how she loved climbing trees, how she used to draw lopsided horses with crayons. His face softened, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Then his phone buzzed on the table. The second he saw the caller ID, the smile was gone. He stepped away, his voice low but sharp. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught enough. "I told you not to call this line. You have no right. Don't you dare mention her." His tone was a whip crack. Then he slammed the phone shut, knuckles white. When he came back, the warmth was gone. He muttered something about business vultures circling, but I wasn't buying it. The room felt heavy, like we'd slipped back into the silence of that lounge the night I'd refused him another drink. Later, I couldn't sleep. The storm outside rattled the windows, the thunder rolling low across the sea. I went walking, trying to clear my head. That's when I saw it, a faint yellow light glowing in one of the side buildings, ground floor. A kid's room from the look of it. The curtains had little cartoon rockets stitched into them. Something about it tugged at me, the way a tune you can't name clings to your brain. Curiosity got the better of me. I edged closer, peered through the window. Inside was a neatly made small bed, shelves of stuffed animals lined up like they were standing inspection. But what stopped me cold was the drawing on the desk. A crayon picture, fresh, the colors too bright to have been sitting for years. A stick figure man with gray hair, standing next to a stick figure girl with brown pigtails, both smiling under a sun. Underneath, in shaky childish letters, "Daddy and me." My chest tightened. His daughter, the one the world had mourned 3 years ago after that helicopter crash. Lily Hale. I told myself maybe it was old. Maybe he kept her room like a shrine. But the crayon wax glistened like it had been pressed to paper just days ago. My pulse kicked up. Something was wrong. The next night confirmed it. I was sitting on the deck of my quarters when Hale came by, his face more serious than I'd ever seen it. He sat down across from me, his hands folded like he was bracing for a confession. "Emily," he said quietly, "I haven't been honest about why I brought you here. For years now, I've been testing people, seeing what they really want. From me, you didn't ask for anything. That's why you're here. To prove I wasn't wrong about you." I stared at him, stunned. "Testing people? You mean this whole week, all of this, was some experiment?" He nodded, slow, almost ashamed. "You'd be shocked how quickly loyalty breaks when money's involved. Or pity, or power. I needed to see if integrity still existed." He leaned forward, his eyes sharper than ever. "And you passed. You're proof it still does." My blood boiled. I wanted to scream. "So you put me here like a lab rat, dangled money in front of me, dragged my family's pain into the light, just to see if I'd break?" He flinched but didn't deny it. That was all I needed. I stood, fists clenched, voice shaking. "I don't want your test. I don't want your money. You don't get to play God with people's lives, General. Arrange my flight. I'm going home." Before he could answer, we heard it. The low chop of rotor blades cutting through the night. A helicopter. Hale's head snapped toward the sound, his jaw tightening. "He wasn't supposed to be here." "Who?" I asked. "Marcus Rourke," he muttered. The name meant nothing to me then, but within an hour, I understood. I was packing when the knock came. Not Hale, but a tall man in a tailored uniform jacket, his hair slicked back, smile too polished to be real. He stepped in like he owned the place. "Miss Carter, Marcus Rourke, Colonel Executive VP of Hale Defense. We should talk." He didn't wait for permission, just looked around with open disdain. "Quaint," he said flatly. Then he pulled a checkbook from his jacket and placed it on the table like it was a weapon. "General Hale gets sentimental, picks strays, nurses, waitresses, thinks they're his saviors. It's a symptom of his condition. My job is to clean up after him. So here's the deal. $500,000 cash if you sign this non-disclosure and get on that helicopter within the hour. You disappear. For good." I stared at the checkbook, then back at his eyes. Cold, dead, like a shark's. "Why are you so scared of me?" I asked quietly. His smirk twitched. "Scared? No. Pragmatic. General Hale is an asset. You're a liability. Don't mistake this for kindness. Take the money and don't make me repeat myself." Something in me snapped. Maybe it was all the times I'd been called dead weight. All the times people thought I'd stay quiet. I met his stare head on. "No, I think I'll stay." For the first time, his mask slipped. His jaw tightened, eyes hardening into something darker. He leaned in, voice dropping to a growl. "You don't understand the machinery you're in, girl. It will grind you to pieces." Then he straightened, buttoned his jacket, and walked out, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and threat hanging in the air. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. His words confirmed everything. There was a secret here bigger than me, bigger than money, something they were desperate to bury. I looked back out the window at that faint yellow glow in the building across the yard, the room with the crayon drawing, and in that moment I knew, if Rourke wanted me gone that badly, then the truth sitting behind that door was the reason. That night as the storm rolled back in, I wasn't Emily Carter the underdog anymore. I wasn't just a nurse or a waitress in uniform. I was the one person on that base who wasn't afraid to pull back the curtain, and I was going to find out exactly what they were hiding, no matter the cost. The storm broke just before dawn. Thunder had rolled all night, rattling windows and making the compound feel like it was shaking from the inside out. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Not after what I'd seen in that hidden room, not after hearing Marcus Rourke threaten me like I was some problem he could buy off. By the time I walked back across the yard, soaked to the bone, Hale was waiting for me on the porch of the main building. He didn't yell. He didn't demand an explanation. He just looked at me like he already knew. And maybe he did. His eyes were rimmed red, his face drawn. But there was a steel in his posture I hadn't seen before. "She's alive," I said quietly, the words sticking in my throat. He closed his eyes like the sentence itself was both a wound and a blessing. When he opened them again, his voice was steady. "They told the world she died with her mother. It was the only way to protect her, and the only way to keep control of my command." I wanted to be angry, and I was, but in that moment I also saw a father hanging on to hope by his fingernails. He explained how after the crash, Lily had been pulled out breathing but damaged, how doctors insisted on letting her go, how the media turned his family into a feeding frenzy. "So I built this," he said, gesturing toward the building, "to keep her safe, to give her a chance. Marcus says I'm bankrupting the company, bankrupting myself. Maybe I am, but I'll never stop fighting for her." Before I could answer, boots stomped across the gravel. Rourke appeared, his face twisted in fury, a pair of aides trailing behind him. He didn't waste time. "General, this ends now. You're compromised. You've let grief rot your judgment. If you won't sign over operational control, the board will force it." His eyes cut to me. "And this girl, she's the spark that'll burn it all down. She goes, or I take it upstairs." I'd seen bullying before, from drill instructors, from bitter sergeants, but the way Rourke spoke to Hale, like the man was nothing but a puppet to be yanked around, made my stomach turn. Hale didn't flinch this time. He straightened his back, set his coffee cup aside, and said in a voice I imagined once carried across battlefields, "Colonel, you're relieved of duty, effective immediately. You will leave this base now." For a moment, nobody moved. You could feel the tension crackle like static. Rourke's face went pale, then red. "You can't." "I can," Hale cut him off, his tone lethal. "And I just did. The moment you step foot off this island, a team of auditors will be waiting to pick apart every deal you've signed in my name. Pray you've kept your hands clean." The aides shifted nervously, suddenly unsure which man held the real power. Rourke saw it too. His jaw worked, fist clenching at his sides. For one terrifying second, I thought he might actually lunge at me, like he needed to pin this all on someone weaker. But Hale's glare froze him where he stood. Finally, with a strangled curse, Rourke turned and stormed off, his boots pounding the gravel until the sound was swallowed by the roar of the helicopter that carried him away. When the blades faded, silence filled the compound. A different silence this time. Not the suffocating kind, but the kind that follows a gunfight when you realize you're still breathing. Hale let out a long, shaky exhale and looked at me. "You shouldn't have seen any of this," he muttered, "but maybe you were meant to." That day changed everything. Hale called his lawyers, his accountants, his allies on the board. The haunted, broken man I'd first met was gone, replaced by the commander people used to follow without question. He moved with purpose, tearing through years of manipulation Rourke had wrapped around him. Every phone call, every order carried weight, and the staff who once looked at me like an outsider started glancing at me differently. Not with disdain, but with something closer to respect. It wasn't instant, though. There were whispers. Some officers muttered that I was just another nobody who got lucky, that I'd only survived because Hale took pity. One even cornered me outside the mess hall, sneering, "Don't get comfortable, Carter. Around here, people like you don't last." And maybe a week earlier, that would have gutted me. But not now. I didn't snap back, didn't even rise to the bait. I just looked him in the eye and said, "Funny, that's what Rourke thought too." He didn't have a comeback. What surprised me most was the guilt. Some of the same soldiers who used to ignore me started stopping by with quiet apologies. Sergeant Kelly, the one who'd nodded at me in the diner, found me by the motor pool and said, "You know, we all thought you'd fold. You didn't. You stood your ground when the rest of us were too scared. That took guts." His voice carried that rough, no-nonsense edge soldiers have when they admit respect. I'll never forget that. As for Hale, it was like watching a man reclaim his soul. He spent hours by his daughter's bedside, but he wasn't drowning in whiskey anymore. He was calling medical experts, setting up new treatment protocols, bringing in specialists from Walter Reed. The same general who'd once given up was back in the fight, this time for his little girl. And though he never said it outright, I knew he credited me for that spark. For me, the fallout was simple but life-changing. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't just the nurse they handed mop duty to when they wanted to remind me of my place. I'd gone toe-to-toe with a man who thought power could buy everything, and I hadn't blinked. That left a mark, not just on him, but on everyone who'd watched from the sidelines. There's a saying in the Army, respect isn't issued, it's earned. For the first time in my career, I felt like I'd actually earned it. Not because of my rank, not because of some ribbon on my chest, but because I'd stood for something when it counted. And the irony? It all started with me saying one simple word no one else had the guts to say to a general drowning himself in bourbon. No. It's funny how the end of one fight can open the door to a dozen more. After Rourke was gone and the dust settled, I figured I'd just fade back into the background, maybe even go back to scrounging shifts at the diner, pay off a few bills, keep my head down. That's the life I knew. But Hale had other plans. 2 weeks later, I was standing in an office building in D.C. with his name still on the door, but something else written underneath. The Hale Foundation. He told me Amelia, his late wife, had dreamed of helping families of wounded service members, and he wasn't about to let grief or corruption bury that dream. And then he did something I never saw coming. He slid a folder across the table to me and said, "Emily, I want you to run it." I laughed, right in his face at first. "General, I'm a nurse who just got fired for talking back in a mess hall. I don't know a damn thing about running foundations." He leaned back, hands folded, calm as ever. "That's exactly why. You're not chasing titles or checks. You see people, not positions. That's what this foundation needs. That's what I need." I remember staring at that folder like it was going to burn my fingers. Inside were budgets, grant outlines, plans to funnel millions into research, into direct support for military families crushed under the weight of medical bills. The same kind of bills I'd been drowning under for years. I thought about Liam gasping into his nebulizer, about Mom crying quietly in the kitchen so we wouldn't hear. And for once, I saw a future where we weren't just barely surviving. So I said yes. Not for the money, not for the title, for the fight. Fast forward a few months, and life didn't look anything like it used to. My brother was on new medication, fully covered by one of the first programs we launched. He was breathing easier, sleeping better, even cracking jokes again like the old days. Mom walked a little taller, like a weight had finally been lifted off her shoulders. As for me, I traded scrubbing trays in a mess hall for conference tables stacked with proposals. Veteran spouses sitting across from me with tears in their eyes because someone finally listened. I wasn't just patching wounds anymore. I was helping stop the bleeding before it ever started. But here's the thing, nobody tells you. Respect in the Army culture isn't automatic, even after you've earned it once. I still got the side eye from some officers when I came back to Fort Hamilton to talk about the foundation. Some of them still muttered dead weight under their breath. That's fine. You don't change an entire system overnight. But you know what I noticed? The younger soldiers, the privates and corporals, they were watching. And when I finished speaking, they were the ones who came up after, shook my hand and said, "Ma'am, thanks. My family needed to hear that." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about proving those who doubted me wrong anymore. It was about giving the next kid, the next nurse, the next forgotten nobody, a reason to believe they weren't invisible. Hale changed too. He wasn't the man I first met slumped over a glass of bourbon. He was present, sharp, even hopeful. He'd call me every week with updates about Lily. "She squeezed my hand today," he'd say, his voice breaking, or, "Her eyes followed the light when the doctors tested." They were small victories, but to him they were everything. And to me they were proof that hope, real hope, is never wasted. Sometimes late at night, I'd think back to that moment in the lounge. The silence, the weight of every officer staring at me like I was insane for telling a general, no. If I'd poured that drink, none of this would have happened. Hale might have drowned himself into oblivion. Rourke would have kept pulling the strings, and I'd still be invisible, carrying trays and swallowing my pride. Instead, one word, one damn word, flipped everything. People ask me now what the lesson is, what I took from all this. And I'll tell you the same thing I tell them. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do isn't charging a hill or firing a weapon. Sometimes it's looking someone in the eye and refusing to let them destroy themselves, no matter how much bigger they are than you. I didn't win medals. I didn't climb the ranks. What I gained was purpose. And if there's anything I want anyone to take from my story, it's this. You're never as small as people make you feel. You have more power than you realize. The kind of power that can change not just your life, but the lives of everyone around you. The last time I visited Fort Hamilton, I stood at morning formation, the flag rising against the sky. The air smelled of coffee and diesel, boots hit the pavement in rhythm, and for the first time I didn't feel like an outsider. I wasn't the butt of a sergeant's joke or the extra body nobody wanted. I was Emily Carter, the woman who'd stood her ground, the one who'd built something that would outlast every whisper, every sneer. And I swear to you, as that flag snapped in the wind, I felt it deep in my chest. Not pride in myself, but pride in the fact that I'd finally proven what I always knew. Dignity, courage, and kindness are the only ranks that really matter. At the heart of Emily's story lies a lesson we often forget. In the noise of everyday life, sometimes the smallest act of courage can change everything. Saying no when everyone expects you to stay silent. Standing up when it would be easier to keep your head down. Life in the military, and outside of it, can teach us to follow orders, to respect hierarchy, to swallow our doubts. But there are moments when silence becomes toxic, when obedience turns into complicity. In those moments, the most human thing we can do is draw a line. Emily wasn't a decorated officer. She didn't carry stars on her shoulder. And yet she proved that dignity and integrity carry a weight that no rank can measure. Her story reminds us that unfair treatment, prejudice, and manipulation only thrive when good people say nothing. As the old saying goes, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and sometimes being that voice, shaky though it may be, is exactly what saves lives, restores hope, and reminds others of what really matters. For anyone who has felt overlooked, dismissed, or treated as if your worth was tied to a title or a paycheck, Emily's journey is proof that true value is found in character, not circumstance. Breaking free from toxic dynamics, refusing to let others define your worth, and daring to believe that your voice matters. These are the quiet revolutions that can ripple outward and reshape entire communities. So now I'd love to hear from you. What did Emily's story stir up in you? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to stand your ground against the odds? Share your thoughts below, hit like if this resonated, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that dig deep into the human heart. Until next time, may you carry strength in your voice, peace in your heart, and hope for brighter days ahead.